remember when I first came here about 12 years ago, you usually heard one every 3 times some sort of Lord of the Rings homily or Narnia homily, and I haven't done that as much. They'll pop up at different times, but it does seem that I start doing these horse homilies right now. They just keep coming up right now. So you're going to get one of those. So something that has been a thrill to experience is when you take a horse outside of the regular trail. When they're on a regular trail that they always know, they don't have the same kind of energy. They're calm, they're tranquil, but sometimes they want to maybe get out of work and whatnot. But when you bring them to a different pasture that they've never been to, or another trail that they're not used to, you can feel their anxiety raise up. It's this weird experience where you all of a sudden, they start going into a flight mode. Remember, they're creatures of flight, not fight. And so there's this experience of them raising their anxiety, and if you're not careful, you start raising your anxiety, and you feed off of one another, and pretty soon you start galloping off in the wrong direction. So a trained rider has to learn how to lead that horse back into peace. Because when that rider is on that horse and that physical contact is there, horses have this amazing ability to read emotions far beyond anything that we could even imagine. They have this like super ability. And so when you're on that horse, one of the things that you have to do, and it's been really interesting learning how to do this while we're going, is to keep the horse in an active walk without them like starting to run. And you take your breath, you just become peaceful, which is hard when you're learning and you're like, but when you just allow yourself to be at peace, there's this amazing thing that happens with that horse. That the horse realizes, wait, my rider is at peace. I don't need to be afraid anymore. And little by little, they start being able to go into the undiscovered territories with a confidence because you're giving them peace. So why do I share this story? The gospel is about this. Jesus Christ is asleep on a cushion in the stern of a ship during a horrible storm. And some commentators would say that's the first miracle. If you've ever been in a giant storm with lightning and thunder and your boat is going everywhere and water's coming in, how do you stay asleep during that? What it shows is that Jesus Christ is not influenced by the storm. He's the King of peace. And so what he's revealing is he can be restful and at peace no matter what's going on around him because he is peace. And he doesn't fall into the anxiety that we do. We're the apostles. And when we have these storms start to rise in our life, panic starts to come. That grasping, kind of that experience if you have ever been out in the water and maybe you're not as good a swimmer, and there's that panic and you start grasping and grasping versus resting and just allowing the buoyancy of your body to actually like carry you. But what happens? We start to panic. And it's this experience of there is nothing under me. There's nothing to support me. And in that knowledge, I start to sink. And St. Augustine would even say that this image of the storm coming up, the wind, and then the waves, and then the boat, is the experience of the wind represents the outward things that are happening in our life. Someone insults us. the waves are what happens when that outward, external, whatever, starts to influence our interior. So someone insults us, and we get stirred up inside, and the waves are the anger, the revenge, the vengeance. Or it could be something scary outside, or something's not going according to plan, and it starts working on our inside, and that's the waves that then take our boat, which is our heart, and starts shaking it back and forth, back and forth. And it's only when we recognize that we forgot our stability, which is Jesus Christ there, because the apostles, at first, they're worried about all the storms, but they don't go to him first until finally they reach out. Now they reach out in that sort of just brutal honesty of saying, this is what our heart is like, Lord. Do you not care that we're sinking? But at least they reach out. And St. Augustine says, what you need to do when you find your interior starting to have the waves that are rocking the peace of your heart, you need to wake the Lord up within you. That part of that reality of the Lord is dwelling within you. And you need to go to him to say, rebuke this storm. Because that's exactly what he does. He gets up and he says, quiet, be still. And those words are the exact same words that he uses against the evil spirits. He says, he rebukes the spirit, and he says, be quiet, come out of him. It's the exact same word. So there's this mystery of these waves, and this wind is something that is connected to those forces of darkness that want us to lose our peace, want us, in a sense, to forget that we need to lean into the one that gives us the stability, and we try to do things ourselves. We try to grasp for our own way out of a situation, and yet what we need to do is we need to go to the Lord who will bring us that peace. This gospel was written for a people that needed peace. This is the gospel according to St. Mark. And to get into a little more specifics of who was this gospel written for, it's written for all of us, but it was written in a particular time, in a particular place. It was written to the church in Rome. And St. Mark was the traveling companion of both St. Paul, but at this time, he was the traveling companion of St. Peter. And some of the ancient manuscripts way, way back, the saint, St. Papias, who let us know that these words from St. Mark's gospel were written by St. Mark as he was listening to St. Peter preach the gospel in Rome, right before he was crucified. And so these words that we hear are to a church that is going through the persecution of the Emperor Nero. The Emperor Nero was a very brutal persecutor. He is the one, maybe by this time that the people are hearing these words, St. Peter has been crucified and St. Paul has been beheaded. And some of the accounts, even secular accounts of Roman historians, said that Rome was lit at night with the human torches of Christians. Thousands and thousands were just put up around, and they were lit on fire. And that was how Rome had light during the night. This is the church that is going through this at this moment. And so St. Mark is taking a story that happened to the apostles, that happened to Peter himself, who maybe has been martyred already, and is now sharing this to this hurting church. This church that maybe is saying, Lord, do you not care that we're perishing? Our people are being lit on fire. Our leaders have been killed. Where are you? And Mark is saying, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is in the boat. He is in this boat of the church. And yes, the storms are raging there, but he's not affected by the storms because he's able to sleep in the midst of the storm. And you need to go to him to find the peace, even in the midst of the storm. And the way that we find that peace is by coming to him, especially in the Eucharist. Because if you think about it, going back to that rider analogy, the rider is physically touching the horse in order for the horse to feel the peace. And how does Jesus Christ physically touch us? As he comes upon our lips. When we receive Jesus, we receive the King of Peace. And we, anxious like a horse, ready to fly, we're in undiscovered areas. We're nervous. We're not sure exactly how the Lord is working in all of the brokenness and division, even within our own world, even within our own church. And Jesus says to us, as he says to the time of Mark's gospel and to the time of the apostles, let me be your peace. Let me reach my hand out, touch your heart. Allow my peace to be conveyed into your body, blood, soul, and humanity so that you can have peace in the midst of the storm. And the saints throughout all the generations, this is their secret of being able to have peace in the midst of terrible persecutions. In closing, I want to just share the words of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, who went through tremendous suffering. I grew up actually very close to her home. And just when I was away this past weekend, I went and prayed in the area where she taught her first children of the first Catholic school of all the United States. But we forget the sufferings that she went through. She lost her husband from consumption tuberculosis. She lost several of her children to consumption tuberculosis. She lost many of her students to that as well. She was persecuted when she converted to Catholicism, so much so that the legislature of New York wrote a particular law saying she's not welcomed in our state because she's dangerous, because now she's Catholic. And so she, in a sense, went away to Maryland and then founded the Catholic school system there. But then she also went through illness herself. She died of tuberculosis and went through a very horrible trial with that. But in the midst of all of those things, all of that wind that was coming, that was trying to stir the waves of the interior life, she says these words. She says, "The soul goes quietly on." And she gave the image of an anchor, saying that in the midst of all these storms that are going on, I know that my God is an anchor that goes all the way down to the bottom. And it's a sure and fixed anchor, so that no matter what happens up here, my soul can still quietly go on in peace because he gives me peace. Let's ask for that anchor, which is the Eucharist, which is relationship and intimacy with Jesus Christ. As he comes upon our lips, let's ask him that we, the horses that are anxious and in flight, may allow his peace to be conveyed into our lives.